Hey everybody, it's Jason Baja here. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the importance of continuing to add weight to the bar of the amount you're lifting over time in order to make progress. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And you know, this might seem counterintuitive because most people are like, well yeah, I mean obviously you have to add weight to the bar or add overload over time, but the reality is you see a lot of people out there who aren't promoting this, and I thought that was kind of a thing of the past, that no one was doing that anymore, till again I had gone and watched that Mike Rashid training video with Kai Green, and I was looking at the amount of weight they're using. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Like, most novice lifters can lift what they're lifting in less than a year for the same number of reps, and then people are like, well no, that's just how Kai Green trains. And that kind of amazes me at the ridiculousness of it. And I want to make a couple points clear when I talk about why you have to add weight. I don't mean that you can't get bigger and make progress on really high reps, because you can. You can. In fact, there's even been studies showing that muscle gains can occur with weights as light as 30% of your max if you do enough reps and enough sets. But I mean, you're talking about if you bench 200 pounds, you are talking about putting 65 pounds on the bar and doing like 4 sets of 25 reps, okay? That will stimulate growth. I'm not saying it won't, but at a certain point, you're going to stop progressing with that. You're going to get to a point to where you will get very sick of doing reps. When you get to 25 rep sets, 30 reps, 40 reps, 50 rep sets, eventually you're going to find it just gets tedious, and making progress is going to stall out. You're not going to be able to sustain that forever. And so I'm not saying that lightweight and high reps with enough volume can't stimulate muscle. It can. I'm not even saying that using really good technique so that you feel the muscles or whatever, I'm not even saying that's bad. You know what? There's a certain degree of truth to that. There is a degree of truth that what some guys do, and they talk about their mind-muscle connection. Do you know what that means? That means you're just using good form. Well, if you're using good form and you are putting pretty good tension on the muscles you're trying to work because you can feel it in them, and again, that's not because you're concentrating on the muscle. It's because in order to feel it in the muscle more, you usually have to use really strict form so that you don't feel the stimulation as much in other muscles. Okay, that's what all the mind-muscle connection is. You're changing your physical technique because you're having to concentrate, and you're finding the technique and the angles and the ranges of motion, usually the full range of motion, that makes that muscle burn more, the one that you're trying to work. And I'm not saying that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with that technique. There's a degree of truth to that. There's a degree of truth to that. But the thing is, no matter how much you squeeze a muscle, no matter how much mind-muscle connection you have, no matter how much volume you have to have progressive overload to grow. We've known this for over 2,000 years. The ancient Greeks figured this out. The ancient Greek philosophers, these men who wrote many ideas that we still understand today. They wrote many mathematical theories we still use today. These men were great minds of their time. They made a lot of discoveries in ancient Greece during their kind of their age of enlightenment. A lot of that was related to exercise. They learned things even about that. These were smart men. They were well-rounded. They tried to learn as many different things as they could about the world. And that included physical fitness. And they realized that progressive overload seemed to be required to gain muscle, to gain strength, things like that. But the thing is, without adding weight, you will eventually stop seeing progressive overload, okay? You will stop seeing progressive overload. And that's the scary thing, that you see a lot of bodybuilders out there promoting this for people who are drug-free, and the bodybuilders using tons of gear. And that's a big difference. Those guys wouldn't be anywhere near as big as they are without all the drugs. In fact, a lot of those guys would look like normal guys who've only been in the gym for a year or two, okay, without all the drugs. You know, and they'll tell you, oh, you can just use this really lightweight, you can squeeze and contract. You know what? You're probably not stimulating much extra growth doing that if there is no progressive overload. Now, can it be adding workload to your other stuff? Sure. Like if you're doing a bunch of heavy barbell rows, you've got strong on barbell rows, weighted chin-ups, things like that, doing some light curls with 20-pound dumbbells afterwards is probably adding volume. That extra volume, that extra metabolic fatigue is probably facilitating some of your muscle growth. But you need to understand that that's because you're adding volume to the other heavier work, okay? The other heavier work is probably the biggest driver of your size changes. and you're just adding additional workload to create a little more metabolic fatigue. And that metabolic fatigue can have an anabolic effect. So I don't want people to get me wrong when I say that, all the real work that you're doing probably is stimulating most of your muscle growth. But I don't want them to think that I'm saying even doing some 20-pound dumbbell curls, even if you're strong enough to do more, isn't adding some fatigue, because it is. You're adding overall workload. All right, and if your overall workload goes up, you're going to grow. And by that same token, if you don't progress much on your bigger lifts and then you cut out all that extra curling you're doing, you're probably not going to see any more bicep growth, because you're not increasing tension and you've reduced total volume. So of course you may not grow that. So I don't want people to think that I'm saying that stuff is worthless, because it's not worthless. It has an additive effect. But that isn't the primary driver of your muscle growth. Doing those lightweight concentration curls is probably not handling the majority of the muscle growth you're seeing in your bicep. It's probably giving a nice additive effect. It's probably helping a little. So there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But what people need to understand, these guys who are big, massive bodybuilders who are training in this way, sometimes with really light weights, 20-pound dumbbells, 115-pound overhead presses with a barbell. A lot of this, you'll even see some of these really big guys doing 135, 155-pound bench presses for high reps. That's not stimulating much, if any, growth in these guys. They're not growing as a result of that training. That is nowhere near enough workloads. And it would be one thing if they were doing a 50-rep set with it, but they aren't. They're coming in and doing 15 reps, okay, with a weight that is probably 20% of what they could be lifting, or 30% of the max of a guy their size, but they aren't repping out 25 or 30 rep sets with it. They're doing 12, 15. All right. People need to understand these guys doing that, and they're talking about getting the pump. That's the drugs, guys. Those guys are getting their gains because of the drugs, and that little bit of fluff training they're doing may or may not be helping. It might be adding extra muscle growth, but it may not. But the thing is, they'll go and teach that and tell guys, no, you just need to focus upon the pump. You just need to do this. Well, that's easy to say when you're genetically gifted for gaining muscle and you're on $1,000 or $1,500 worth of drugs every month. Okay? It's not their supplements doing it. It's not the way they're training doing it. I promise you, the way some of these guys train, most of you would stop growing on it after a year. Meaning the average person out there, if they went and did what I saw Kai Green doing with Mike Rashid in that video and what's being promoted there, if most of you out there trained the way they did with the weights they use for the reps they use and the technique that they use, you would probably stop gaining muscle within a year in the gym. You would stop gaining. All right, the reality is progressive overload, progressive workload is the key driver of hypertrophy. And progressive workload eventually requires you to keep adding mechanical tension. Adding reps helps, adding sets helps, but ultimately, if you're not adding extra tension, those things will reach a threshold to where you can't really increase them anymore. Even adding a little more volume stops giving appreciable size gains. You have to get stronger with the weight on the bar. And I don't mean your 1 rep maxes. Let's not confuse it. I'm not saying you got to get amazing at maxing out. What I'm saying is your 10 rep sets, you probably need to add weight to the bar over time. I can promise you on your bench press, if you use the same technique, same form, if you go from being able to do 135 pounds for 10 reps to doing 225 for 10 reps, I promise you that your pecs and your triceps and your delts are going to get significantly bigger in that time frame. They're going to get noticeably bigger. They're going to get a lot bigger. They're going to get a lot bigger by adding that extra plate to the side over time for your 10 rep sets. So there's a difference there. And the same thing, when we're talking about adding weight to the bar, I don't mean adding weight at any expense, because what's the reason we're adding weight to the bar when you're trying to make gains? To add more tension, to put more mechanical tension on the muscle, because the weight being applied to the muscle is the tension it's being subjected to. The distance it's moving it, the amount of reps it's doing, the amount of volume that it's doing it with, that creates metabolic fatigue. Both of those factors are factors in muscle growth, okay? They're both factors in muscle growth. So if you're changing the range of motion to lift more weight, to give yourself either a shorter range of motion or give yourself a better mechanical advantage, and you're adding weight that way, you're not putting more tension on the muscle, okay? You're not putting more tension on the muscle. But if you're doing the same range of motion, The same technique, the same leverage is if you add weight to the bar over time, that muscle, those muscles being hit with that will get bigger and stronger as a result of the increased tension. So we need to understand that when we talk about adding weight to the bar, we don't mean by cheating it up. We don't mean by finding a leverage that lets you lift more. We don't mean by changing the range of motion to make it shorter so that you can move at less distance, which does make it easier. You guys would be surprised how much weight you can add to a bar by reducing range of motion. It's actually possible to, on some exercises, to increase the weight you can lift by over double. Meaning a 300-pound lift could turn into a 600 or a 700-pound lift if range of motion is cut down enough due to mechanical advantages. But that's not going to stimulate more growth. That's not going to stimulate more growth. But if you can increase weight on the bar over time, that is necessary to continue to make changes, to continue to make muscles bigger using the same range of motion, same leverages. That is almost a requirement to see continued long-term muscle growth. If you don't increase the weight on the bar, you will eventually stall. And you will stop gaining muscle. You'll stop seeing changes. So we need to understand the importance of that. Don't let these bodybuilders who are on tons of drugs convince you and fool you into believing that you can just use really light weights indefinitely and just keep making gains, because that's not reality. I'm not saying those aren't useful tools. They are. But you have to get stronger. You have to get stronger over time, particularly people who are natural or who are very conservatively enhanced. You can't rely upon ultra lightweight indefinitely like a lot of these guys do. You will stop growing. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.